has expired, and the chair now recognizes the gentleman from Texas 12th District for 5 minutes for questions. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't see the gentleman from Colorado or Oregon in front of me, but the gentleman from Oregon is recognized for 5 minutes. I'm sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Secretary, thank you for being here. So I am from Oregon, and the Columbia River runs across the north side of it. And of course, we have all these dams that generate, I think the nameplate is around 36,000 megawatts, and the continuous about 16,000 megawatts. So it's obviously hugely important. It happens that the Biden administration entered into a non-binding MOU with tribal and pro-breach of certain of those dams for using ratepayer dollars to ostensibly create solar and other intermittent sources to offset the reduction in generating capacity that would occur when the 4 lower Snake River dams were breached. I obviously oppose that. I held a hearing up in Washington State as chair of the Water Subcommittee on Natural Resources. We had 400 people show up that were adamantly opposed to dam breaching, and we went through all of the obvious justifications for keeping those dams. I believe the MOU is still in place, and I'm hoping that the department will put an end to it and say, look, we're not going to spend money in replacing ostensibly the power generated by these dams with solar or otherwise. Have you been brought current on this situation?
Absolutely, Representative. We are working that issue and have been working that issue for several weeks now. I agree with you entirely. Those are great projects that were built decades ago in our country, and generations have benefited from that hydropower, which you can ramp it up when we need more power and you can ramp it down when we don't need it. That's highly valuable power. And you can never replace something like that with wind or solar because you don't know when they're going to be there and when they're not there. They are totally different things. We don't have a bag to store electricity in. The critical criterion of an electricity grid is that it meet demand at peak time.
And that function as a gigantic storage device that in those sets of dams up and down the Columbia River and the Snake Rivers is hugely important to intermittent power, is it not?
It's hugely important to our grid. Absolutely. They can reduce the damage of intermittent power sources, but even without intermittent power sources, you need to be able to have higher electricity at times of peak demand and less electricity at times where demand is low, and hydropower allows you to do that. They're tremendous resources.
There's no doubt that we're engaged in an existential battle when it comes to artificial intelligence, and there's been a number of server farms owned by many moving into the Northwest. I think they're going to be a huge part of us ultimately winning that race. But there seems to be a disconnect when it comes to the absolute need for additional electrical generation. I see that we have basically a flat production curve, flat, and China has one that's shooting straight up. What is your plan? What is the department's plan to do to catch up, if you will?
We need to pivot the direction we've been on in this country. You know, again, during the last 4 years, we spent tens of billions of dollars to do 2 things: to subsidize the installation of intermittent sources. Peak demand in PJM, where we are right now, inauguration night at 4 a.m., wind was 2% of electricity, solar was 0. Together, between the two of them, 2% of peak demand. That's when it matters. If you're not there at peak demand, you're just a parasite on the grid because you just make the other sources turn up and down as you come and go. So we are trying to reduce the barriers to investment in reliable dispatchable sources such as hydropower, and we are doing everything I can together with this Congress through the big beautiful bill to reduce the subsidies that put intermittent unreliable sources on our grid. We pay people to put stuff on our grid that ultimately makes our grid more expensive. If you subsidize something, it better be cheaper. We're subsidizing something and getting a more expensive product at the end. That's a big loss.
And could you also, it certainly is, can you also address the fact that with intermittent power, you have to have a backup, thus you double the cost, triple the cost, because you can't just rely upon wind when the wind doesn't blow. So you've got to have that backup. So that's driving up the cost of that particular source of power, is it not?
Well, correct. And we're inadvertently making all these other energy sources have to back them up. If you build a natural gas power plant, for example, and then the sun shines and you got to turn it down, and then the sun goes behind a cloud and you got to turn it up, that's a much less efficient way to run a power plant. Our electricity markets have rewarded low-value electricity, and we've subsidized to put more of it on. Germany and Denmark and England have shown where this leads, de-industrialization.
Certainly does. Thank you so much. Yield back.
Thank you very much. The gentleman's time has expired and yields back. The chair now recognizes the gentlelady from Washington's 8th District for 5 minutes for questions.